Today I want to do another pair analysis, this time with hexagrams 15 and 16. The first thing I always look at when I'm doing one of these pair analysis is what elements are present. And in this pair, we have the earth or the mountain beneath the world. And we have on 16 the world beneath fire. Okay. And so the world is that divine feminine aspect, and it's present in both of these. It's below, it's on top here and below here. And then we have those terrestrial elements of fire or thunder and lightning, and then the earth or the mountain. And in case you're not really familiar with the I Ching's elemental system, that world element is one of those four celestial beings. It's sort of the Mother Earth kind of element. She has the power to hold all of life. She's immense, deep, grounding, fertile, and life-sustaining. And then the earth, that terrestrial counterpart to the world, that element is sometimes, which is sometimes called the mountain, and it contains a quality more like the ground that we stand on. Coolness, stillness, stability. It's associated with pathways, doors, beginning and ending, and completion of all things. And the fire element is sometimes called thunder and lightning, which is here, right, on top of the world. And it has a spreading quality to it. It stimulates or brings things into motion, arouses growth and regeneration. And so after I've looked at these elements present, the next thing I look at is those line arrangements. And you'll see in these two hexagrams, let me kind of put them this way, that they're all broken lines except one solid. So here we have that solid line in the fourth position, and here we have it in the third position. And so there's this space that exists. If you think about it, each hexagram of 6 lines is made up of these trigrams of 3 lines, which are the elements. So there's a gap. That space between 3 and 4 is a significant space. When you're leaping from that bottom element into the top element, you're making some sort of important crossing. And that's important to note here, that there's that sort of element of this solid line being the only one, and it's making that jump. So let's look for a minute just at the individual hexagrams. In 15, where Earth is below the world, we have the image of the mountain beneath the world, right? Some of the names given to this are modesty, humility, moderation, respect, yielding, and retiring. And the central teaching seems to be about this temperance in all things, this inner stability that looks past pride and sees through complexity to find this simple, most essential thing. And the image of a mountain with the peak flattened like a plateau, sort of like I've drawn here, is one way of thinking of this concept of humility. That plateau can be that one solid line in the whole hexagram of open lines. It's this heavenly influence amid all of these supple lines, right? But it's encouraged to not dominate. So we don't have this domineering mountain peak. We have this humble mountain peak, right? And then I've heard of other images proposed as useful, as it's useful to think of that entire mountain actually submerged beneath a flat surface. I don't know how we would see that in real nature or how we would know about it, but if you just imagine that feeling of that whole mountain being hidden beneath the surface, that's sort of a humbleness of this ginormous, immense inner place that can influence but not dominate. You could also possibly think of this mountain as like a buried city, a temple that is an archaeological site that has been completely covered over. So there's like this ancient wisdom in need of uncovery, but at the right time. So as I was looking at this hexagram called humility, that use of the word humility and humiliation, there's a contrast between those two words and how we feel about them, right? Sometimes I think we can lump humbleness and humility with humiliation, mistaking them all as variations on small, weak, or injured. But we actually give humbleness this place of it's a high place for a low concept, or that it's an intentional and noble choice to be humble, right? There's this enormous power in choosing to lay low inside when you are not. You're immense inside, open as the whole world and carrying that will of the size of a mountain, right? Inside, and choosing not to display that, choosing humility. Uh, though I think it's also sometimes something we don't choose. We fear pridefulness. We have put some this kind of value on humility to the point that we become afraid to speak deep truths and we hide them. It's sort of like a will paralysis, or even like a boast, right? That act of displaying humility becomes a shadow when we insist on being humble and hoarding our mountain from some kind of stubbornness or clinging to this idea of humility as a virtue. And line 6 is kind of the commentary on that, is a clue to that shadow side, right? Because it speaks of being famous for your humility, which, if too many people know you're being humble, then you're kind of doing that wrong. It's not um, really humility at all, it's more of a sham. And so, as is the case with almost every teaching in the I Ching, the key is to recognize when it's the right time to be humble and when it's the right time to shine your light, which is kind of where hexagram 16 comes into play, right? So when we can find ourselves in this place of perfect balance between um, heaven and earth, as we learn in our paraanalysis for 11 and 12, that sort of like balanced unification with the Tao, um, that's when our will becomes that mountain of quiet strength that can't be appended. And we are able to navigate sort of in this agile, unfazed by struggle sort of way, which is necessary when you're making a really dangerous crossing, such as we expect to be making with these lines that are moving up, right? Um, Hexagram 16, where fire is above the world, we have the image of signal fires lit across the land, right? Some of the names given to this one are certainty, enthusiasm, harmonious joy, repose, happiness, provision, confidence, excitement, intemperance, and self deception. Right? So that's a lot of different titles we can see happening when people translate this. And the way these concepts work together is that certainty, this one called certainty sometimes, it is humility in action. When we have an outburst of enthusiasm and it's emanating from that place of Tao, that balance, we become at rest in our assurance of when it's the right time to act, right? Your mind is at ease if you're certain of the situation and your place within it. And that signal firing across the whole land, that's like calling others, right? There is no time for doubt. There is no the biggest mistake is a failure to act on this certainty. And so that confidence that comes with alignment with nature, right? While humility is this hidden reserve of power, certainty is this sort of fertilizing, spreading, contagious spirit, right? It's not only being certain of yourself, but you're being certain of your place in this situation. And your certainty is so certain it's contagious, right? It's catching. That one fortress lights their signal fire, and then the next fortress sees it and lights their own, and the next one, and so on. And that excitement just catches on and on. And that's the difference between pridefulness or boasting which are some of the qualities that can be cast in shame as the opposite of humility, they are considered embarrassing because there's a shallowness to them. This brag is shallow. It's not a certainty, it's a boast. And it's mistrusted because there is a sense of not having fully examined, gone through the depths, and stored up that mountain beneath the surface. And so that pride is sort of a shadow side to the certainty. And it's hinted at in that self-deception translation of the title. That false certainty, or a too quickness to act, is one side of this. And so I've also read this throughout the I Ching. There are these animal powers, right? And when we did the analysis on 9 and 10, we met the tiger in hexagram 10, who taught us to prudently follow the river through the jungle. And in this pair, there are references to the great gray rat-headed hamster, who is this sort of solitary, untamed creature that lives in the burrows of the underworld. And she's sort of like a metaphor for moments of insight that can come to us in dreams, or these states of subconscious. And so I think that is actually a great companionship with that great mountain that's humbly residing below the surface, right? We have this intuition that navigates that mountain, the burrows into that mountain. And appropriate action on that intuition is what this hexagram certainty is about. This particular insight made me wonder for a little bit about magic, right? What is the magic? Where does it come from? And what is our power? So, at least in Chinese philosophy, you've maybe heard of Qigong, or even just Qi, which Qi is this Tai Chi. There are these references to it as a sort of life force, right? It's abundantly available energy that exists within all things of the universe, right? It accumulates in us and plants, and everything has a bit of life inside of it, this Qi force, right? And it's always accumulating and circulating all the time. My Kung Fu instructor would always talk about Tai Chi as this exercise that helps us circulate out stale Qi and brings in fresh Qi. That's kind of an example of how the concept of Qi is operating, right? It's this magic that we can only accumulate or hold so much at one time. It spins fairly quickly. It replenishes fairly quickly. But the horsepower, for lack of a better word, is on Qi is kind of low, right? We aren't going to do heavy lifting. Gong, the other part of Qigong, on the other hand, is this deep and heavy and very slowly accumulating force. Gong burns slowly, doesn't run out quickly. It's able to do that heavy lifting and still maintain a reserve. It's something that we accumulate theoretically through the four virtues, or the practice of the four virtues, which in the I Ching, those are referenced in hexagram 1. Discipline, love, justice, and truth. When we're living in these virtues and in harmony with the Tao, we enter into the power stream of the universe. That is a heavy kind of power and magic, right? And so for me, this concept of these two kinds of magic or power that we can tap into explains a lot about why I've always been a little uncomfortable whenever I encounter and hear some of the concepts that come out of like the law of attraction or the secret, this idea that you can manifest anything you desire by setting intentions. And it does work, right? But if you're doing that sort of manifestation without entering the Tao and cultivating Gong, then you're doing it on Qi power alone, which isn't very sustainable, at least not for every kind of task, and really not for big works at all. And it can lead to exhaustion, right? An empty husk. And so the line of logic I think I'm kind of seeing here is that as magicians, the power of our magic is proportional to our cultivation of virtue. And that cultivation of virtue is something that is undertaken with humility, right? We need to be aware of our place and cultivate a deep connection to the ground, the earth, the world, sort of building up that mountain beneath the surface, and nurturing a relationship with that gray rat who knows those under regions and can navigate this sort of inner shadowy abyss, and bring us those treasures of insight, and gratitude for our companionship with her, and with love, and with the deep truths of nature. That is the sort of thing that humility, the role that it plays in our lives as magicians, if that's what we are, if that's what you consider yourself. And when we have that, and we know when it's the right time to signal, then we know when it's the right time to signal and gather friends for a task.